After my husband passed away, my stepdaughter became bedridden by illness, and for 5 years I did everything I could not to fall apart. Then one night I found an unlabeled bottle of pills hidden in a drawer. A terrible suspicion started growing inside me. Early the next morning, the doctor rushed to find me, his face completely pale. "Call the police now," he said shakily. "There's something you need to know. And we may already be too late." Before we go any further, thank you for being here. It means everything. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from, your city, your country? I want to know who is in this room with me tonight. And a quick note, this story contains fictional elements woven in for storytelling purposes. Any similarity to names or places is coincidental, but everything it has to say, I believe, is worth hearing. My name is Adeline Whitfield. I am 68 years old. For the last 5 years, I have lived in a narrow, clapboard house on East Jones Street in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of house that smells of magnolia in March and damp Spanish moss the rest of the year. And for those 5 years, I have spent every single morning lifting a woman who is not my daughter out of a hospital bed I had installed in her father's old study. Her name is Cordelia. Bennett, my late husband, called her Della. He died on a Tuesday in October of 2019 of a heart that quit without warning between sips of coffee at the breakfast table. 6 months later, in the spring of 2020, Della was in the accident, or what they told me was an accident, and I made him a promise at his graveside before I knew what that promise would cost me. I won't leave Della alone, Bennett. Not ever. I keep my promises. I am by stubborn temperament and Methodist upbringing the kind of woman who keeps promises. That perhaps is the only thing my own daughter has ever held against me. The clock on the mantel says 6:15. The November light is still gray and slow outside the bay window. I push myself up from the recliner where I've slept for the last 63 months. The chair groans. My knees groan louder. There's a knot in my lower spine that hasn't unknotted since 2021, and I no longer pretend it ever will. In the study, Bennett's study, where his ledgers and his pipe and his stubborn southern silence used to live, Della lies under a thin yellow blanket I knitted the winter after the accident. Yellow because Bennett once told me she had loved sunflowers as a child. The blanket has been washed so many times it has gone the color of weak tea. "Good morning, sweetheart." She doesn't answer. She hasn't answered in any real way for nearly 5 years. But I speak to her anyway. I learned long ago that emptiness in a sick room rots the carer faster than the patient. The doctor never mentions that. The internet never mentions that. The women at church who pat my hand and say I am a saint, they do not mention it either. I peel the blanket back. I check her chest, her color, the angle of her head on the pillow. I lift her right arm gently, because the joint clicks, and rotate it through the small circle the physical therapist taught me in 2020, before insurance stopped paying and the therapist stopped coming. I do the left arm, I do the legs, I run a warm washcloth along her collarbone, her neck, her hairline. Her hair has gone the color of bone since she was 35. She is 40 now, 41 in February. When I roll her onto her side to wash her back, I see them again. The calluses. Tiny, faint, no bigger than peppercorns on the heel of each foot. I noticed them first about 2 years ago. I asked Dr. Ezra Boone, the family physician who has handled Della's case from the very first night, and he told me it was a benign side effect of slow rotational therapy pressure points where her heel rested against the bed rail in her sleep. I believed him. I believed him because I had no reason not to. I believed him because the alternative was not a thought I knew how to think. By 6:40, I have her changed. By 6:50, I have her propped against the pillow, head tilted just so, eyes half open in the unfocused way they have been since the accident. I bring a small bowl of warm oatmeal from the kitchen, soften it with cream until it is barely thicker than milk, and feed her one slow spoonful at a time. She swallows. She always swallows. Dr. Boone calls it preserved bulbar reflex. I call it the only thing that has kept her alive on my watch. While I feed her, I talk. I talk about the weather, about the magnolia by the porch dropping its last leaves, about the pecan pie Bertie Calloway, the widow across the street, who has known me longer than my own children brought over on Sunday. I talk about everything I can think of except the people on her father's side of the family. I have learned not to mention them. About a year ago, maybe less, I said the name Vivian while I was wiping her chin and Della's right eyelid twitched. Just once. Quick as a dragonfly over still water. I told myself it was a stray nerve. The body does strange things when it has been held still too long. I have told myself a lot of things over 5 years. I keep a small paper calendar on the wall beside the door. I cross off each day with a red pen. I do this not because I am counting toward anything in particular, but because on bad nights, the unbroken march of red X's across the page is the only proof I have that I am still alive too. Today's date is Tuesday, November the 18th, 2025. Tomorrow, Wednesday, 3 different people will ring my doorbell between dawn and sunset, and by the time the street lamp flickers on outside, the small, dim, repetitive shape of my life will have a hairline crack running through it. I do not know this yet. I will not know it for hours. What I know now at 6:58 in the morning is that the last spoonful of oatmeal is gone, and Della is breathing in the slow, even rhythm she has breathed in for years, and the November light has finally cleared the dogwood out front, and somewhere in this old house a floorboard is ticking, the way old houses tick when they are settling themselves against the cold. The kettle hasn't whistled. The mailman won't come for hours. I have this gray morning an illusion of peace. I wipe her chin with the corner of a clean cloth. I lay my hand just for a moment on the crown of her head, the one tenderness I am allowed, because she is asleep enough not to flinch from it. I love you, Della, I say. I have said it 10,000 times. She has never said it back. Bennett, if you are listening, I think I am still keeping the promise. The clock on the mantel turns to 7. The doorbell rings. Wednesday morning. 7 o'clock sharp. The chime hangs in the cold air of the foyer, and for one foolish second, I imagine that whoever is on the other side of the door has come to the wrong house, a UPS driver, a Jehovah's Witness, the boy who delivers Della's prescriptions. It is none of them. I open the door, and there is my daughter Sloane. Sloane Whitfield is 44 years old. She lives 3 hours away in Atlanta. She has not spent a Wednesday morning in this house in 9 years. She is holding a casserole dish wrapped in a kitchen towel and a small bouquet of grocery store carnations. "Mama," she says, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "I drove down last night. I stayed at the Marriott. I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't wake me." "No, I see that." She sets the casserole on the hall table beside the bowl of unopened mail. She studies my face, the gray under my eyes, the way my left hand grips the doorframe, and her own face does something complicated. How is she? The same. Sloane glances down the hallway toward the study, then back at me. "Mama, we need to talk. About you, about the house, about please don't make that face, about moving Della into proper care." She talks in the kitchen while I make coffee neither of us will finish. She talks about a place outside Athens with a wooded view. She talks about respite, about how my back is bowed and my hair is thin, and the women at church are worried, "Mama, you don't see what we see." Her words are soft. Her eyes are not. Her eyes are searching. What is Della's neurologist's name again? Boone. Yes. Annie keeps her file at his office, or here, just in case the place in Athens needs intake records. Here, most of it. Where exactly? I set the cup down. Why does it matter where exactly? She blinks. She smiles. The smile arrives a half second too late. "It doesn't, Mama. I just want to help." She leaves at 9:15. The carnations stay on the hall table. The casserole goes cold. The bell rings the second time at 10 past noon. I'm still standing in the kitchen holding a mug that has stopped steaming. The man on the porch is Tobias Renfield. He is 36 tall with the kind of even teeth that come from a good orthodontist. He is, the family has always said, Della's distant cousin on the Ashby side, a connection thin enough that I have never quite traced its line on the tree. He has a leather portfolio under one arm. "Mrs. Whitfield, may I come in?" "What do you want, Tobias?" "To help, as always." He sits at the kitchen table without being asked. He spreads documents across the surface. "I scrubbed clean an hour ago." "The trust review," he says. "I told you on the phone last month." "You told me nothing." He lets that pass. He always lets things pass. "Adeline, the numbers are not sustainable. The cost of caring for this living asset." He stops, the faintest tightening at the corner of his mouth. "This loved one." I misspoke. "The cost of caring for Della cannot continue at the current burn rate without—" "Living asset." "A figure of speech. I work in finance. We use ugly language." He stays 40 more minutes, and I do not hear most of what he says because those 2 words have settled in my chest like a swallowed stone. When he finally gathers his portfolio and goes, I notice that the manila folder he opened in front of me has a small, almost invisible carbon copy slipped beneath it as if he came prepared to leave a duplicate behind. He goes. The afternoon light begins to slant low. I move from room to room in my own house like a woman who has misplaced something she cannot name. At 4:20, the bell rings a 3rd time. Vivian Ashby is 60 years old. She is Bennett's older sister, which in the order of this family makes her Della's blood aunt, and the closest thing Della had to a mother before Bennett married me, an arrangement Vivian has never quite forgiven either of us for. Her hair is the color of polished pewter. Her perfume arrives before she does. She is carrying a slim leather folder. "Adeline, darling, we must speak. May I?" She does not wait for the may. She places her folder on the kitchen table where Tobias's papers were laid out 3 hours earlier. The 2 ghosts of paperwork seem to recognize each other. "It is time," she says, "to sell the old house. The Whitfield place on Bull Street." "Yes, it is rotting from the inside. The tax burden is obscene. Della cannot live in it. You will not live in it. Bennett would have wanted us to be sensible." She slides a fountain pen across the wood toward me. "Sign on page 3, dear. I have already had it notarized in advance to spare you the inconvenience." "Notarized?" I say. "By whom and whose presence, not mine?" For the smallest fraction of a second, her mouth opens, then closes like a fish considering a hook. Then she laughs a low, polished social laugh, the kind heard at dinner parties. "Adeline, dear, that house is just rotting wood and old grief. Why hold on to a coffin?" I do not laugh. I push the pen back across the table. The pen rolls. It stops at the folder. She leaves at 5:52. Her perfume stays in the kitchen long after the front door clicks shut. I stand alone at the table staring at the unsigned page until the bay window gives back nothing but my own faint reflection in the dark. At 8, I bring Della her supper of broth and pureed apple. The unsigned deed Vivian left behind is still in the pocket of my apron. When I lean down to settle the napkin under her chin, her right eyelid begins to flutter fast, 3 short, 2 long, 3 short again. The same odd rhythm I noticed last spring, the one Dr. Boone said was a meaningless tick, the one I dismissed every time. At 11, I go in to give Della her last set of pills. I open the small wooden drawer where I keep her bottles neatly aligned, alphabetized, and I see between the baclofen and the diazepam an amber bottle without a single word on its label. 11 at night. The lamp on Della's bedside table is the only light in the room. I lift the bottle out of the drawer. It is light, 3/4 full perhaps. The pills inside are white, round smaller than the baclofen tablets, smaller than the diazepam, closer in size to a child's aspirin. There is no label, not a torn one, not a smudged one. The amber glass is bare. I turn back toward Della and hold the bottle up where she can see it. Her eyes, those slow, unfocused eyes I have spent 5 years memorizing, sharpen. Her right eyelid begins to flutter again. Faster this time. 3 short, 2 long. Pause. 3 short, 2 long. Pause. I do not know what to do with this. I do not know what to do with any of it. So I do the only thing a frightened old woman can do at 11 at night. I close the drawer with the unlabeled bottle still inside, give Della only the medications. I recognize kiss her forehead and turn off the lamp. I do not sleep. The recliner has a way of holding a body without holding a mind. At 6, the next morning, Thursday, now the 20th of November, I dial Dr. Boone's office and leave a message I rehearse 3 times before recording, about a bottle in my drawer that does not match any prescription I know, about white round pills the size of a child's aspirin. The receptionist's voicemail beeps and swallows my words. He does not call back. Not at 7. Not at 8. At 9:30, the doorbell rings, and for the first time since yesterday, my chest does not seize. The chime today is a chime I know. Pastor Silas Hollander stands on the porch with a covered Tupperware in his hands and a wool cap slanted on his white hair. He is 74 years old. He has been the minister at St. Andrew's Methodist on Bull Street for 41 of those years. He buried Bennett. He's been bringing me chicken and rice soup every second Thursday of the month since the Thursday after the funeral. Adeline. Silas, you look like you haven't slept. I haven't. He follows me into the kitchen. He sets the Tupperware on the counter. He does not sit. He stands with his hands in his coat pockets, looking through the open doorway down the hall toward Della's room. Funny thing, he says, about a body that lies still for 5 years. What? It doesn't leave footprints in the kitchen. Silas, I'm just saying Adeline. It's a thought I've had several times over the years. He looks at me then. The pale, watery, very kind eyes of a man who has spoken at 50 funerals, not unkind, not cruel, asking. Then he turns and lets himself out without goodbye, and the soup steams on the counter, and I sit down slowly in a kitchen chair because my knees have decided they cannot do their work. I sit there for a long time. The soup steams, then stops steaming. Pastor Silas's words turn over in my head like a coin I cannot place. Footprints in the kitchen. 5 years, the drawer in Della's room, the unlabeled bottle, the eyelid that flickered 3 short and 2 long when I held the bottle up to her face. I try in the early afternoon to identify the pill. I empty 1 round white tablet into a saucer. I take a photograph with the cracked screen of the cell phone Sloan bought me 4 Christmases ago. I upload it to a website that claims to identify medications by shape and imprint. There is no imprint. The site very politely gives me nothing. I sit at the kitchen table with the saucer and the small white pill in front of me. The November sun moves across the floor. I do not move with it. Outside, a neighbor child rides a bicycle past the window, ringing a bell I will hear in my sleep for years. Inside, I begin very softly to be afraid. By 6 in the evening, I have not eaten. I am sitting beside Della's bed, reading the 23rd Psalm out loud, not because I believe the words can save us, but because the cadence steadies my hands when I notice that Della's lips have gone the wrong color. Not pale, gray. Her chest is rising shallowly, then not rising at all, then rising again with a sound like wet paper tearing. The fingers of her right hand have curled inward against her palm. I am 68 years old and I have not moved this fast in 20 years. I am on my feet. I am dialing 911. The dispatcher's voice is calm. My voice is not. My daughter, my stepdaughter, she's stopped breathing. She's been bedridden 5 years. East Jones Street, 341. The White House with the dogwood, please. Stay on the line, ma'am. Stay with me. The unit is en route 4 minutes. I am still on the line when the doorbell rings for the 4th time in 2 days. The dispatcher tells me to open the door for the paramedics. I run. I throw the bolt. I pull. And on my porch at 6:21 on a Thursday evening, 8 miles and 28 minutes from her own front door, according to the clock in my head, stands Vivian Ashby. Adeline. Hang up the phone. Della does not need an ambulance. Della needs rest. The hospital will only stress her. Get out of my way. Adeline, listen to me. Get out of my way. The words come out of me like something I have been holding in my chest for 5 years. Vivian takes 1 step backward. The polished pewter of her hair catches the porch light. Her hand for a moment reaches for my arm, then thinks better of it. You will regret this. Move. She moves. The siren is already in the next block. 2 paramedics, a young black woman with cornrows, and a heavy-set white man with a mustache push past Vivienne with the gurney and the kit and the steady professional speed of people who do this every week. They are in Della's room for 4 minutes and out again in 6. They lift my stepdaughter onto the gurney. They strap her down. They run hard. I climb in beside her. The door slams. The siren turns on. The ambulance pulls away from the curb so hard that I have to brace myself against the wall, and as the truck swings into the street, I look back through the rear window. Vivienne is still on my porch. She is not watching me go. She is holding her phone, and from the angle of her shoulders, I can tell even through the glass that whoever she is talking to is not a friend. The corridor of Memorial Health Medical Center smells of disinfectant and old coffee. I am running at 68 years old to keep up with the gurney they have rolled my stepdaughter onto. The wheels squeak against the linoleum. The fluorescent lights pass over my face, each one a small white slap. My heart does not beat. It hammers like a fist against a locked door. They wheel her through swinging doors I am not allowed to pass. A young nurse with a butterfly tattoo on her wrist eases me into a plastic chair. "Ma'am, sit. We've got her now." My knees fold without my permission. My hands begin to tremble, small, miserable shudders that have nothing to do with the cold. I press them flat against my thighs. They keep moving anyway. An hour passes. Maybe 2. The clock on the far wall lies. Then a woman in a white coat comes through the swinging doors, short, dark-haired, late 30s, with the focused face of someone who has not eaten supper either. She crosses the corridor straight toward me. "Mrs. Whitfield." Yes, I'm Dr. Marin Tate, rehabilitation specialist. I've been called to the intake. May I sit?" She does not wait for permission. She lowers herself onto the chair beside me, knees angled toward mine, and the way she sits close level sends a fresh shiver down my spine. How is she? My throat is so dry the words scrape coming out. She is stable, breathing on her own, responding to stimuli. A relief so violent it almost knocks me sideways. I press the back of one trembling hand to my mouth. Tears prick the corners of my eyes. My chin quivers like a child's about to confess to something. Oh, thank God. "Mrs. Whitfield, I have to ask you something. How long exactly has Cordelia been bedridden?" 5 years, I say. 5 years and 7 months and 12 days, but who is counting? Dr. Tate's mouth pulls inward at the corners. The expression is small. The expression is also terrible. "And during those 5 years, has she received regular physical therapy?" For the first 8 months, yes. After that, the insurance stopped paying. The therapist stopped coming. I rotated her arms every morning. "Stop, please, you did nothing wrong. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Cordelia's body is not the body of a woman bedridden for 5 years. The musculature in her calves and thighs is wasted, yes, but it is not the wasting we see in long-term immobility. It is something else. There are pressure marks on the soles of her feet, subtle calluses. Her tendons have not contracted the way they should have. And her blood work. Her blood work, what?" She pauses, then she says it. "Mrs. Whitfield, call the police." 3 words. 3 words, and the floor of the world tilts beneath me. The chair, the linoleum, the fluorescent lights, all of it slides sideways at once. A thin, broken howl tears out of my throat. The back of my hand finds my mouth a beat too late. Tears spring to my eyes so hot they sting. My shoulders begin to shake. 5 years of bathing, her feeding her, turning her through the night so she would not get bed sores. 5 years of sleeping in a recliner. 5 years of being lied to. My chest seizes a hot, splintering pain just below the breastbone, and I bend forward over my own knees, struggling to draw enough air to keep from fainting. The waiting room ceiling lights blur into long, white rivers. Dr. Tate's hand closes over mine. Her grip is small, but very steady. "Breathe, Mrs. Whitfield. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I am calling the on-duty officer right now. You are not alone in this room." She is on her phone for less than a minute. By 3:16 in the morning, a woman in a charcoal coat steps off the elevator and walks toward us with a slow, unhurried, unsmiling stride. She is 51 years old with a square jaw, hair clipped gray at the temples, and the kind of eyes that have looked at very ugly things for a very long time and still come to work in the morning. Mrs. Whitfield, Detective Imogen Hartley, Savannah Chatham, Metro. Dr. Tate has briefed me. May I ask you some questions while everything is fresh? Yes, anything. Take your time. Slow breaths. She sits opposite me. She opens a small leather notebook. Her pen hovers. Tell me in your own words the last 48 hours. I try. I do try. But my voice no longer belongs to me, it cracks. Doubles back, forgets the order of things. I tell her about Sloane and the carnations, about Tobias and the words, living asset, about Vivienne and the deed she swore was already notarized, about Pastor Silas and the footprints in the kitchen, about an amber bottle without a label sitting in my drawer between the baclofen and the diazepam. She writes. She does not interrupt, but the line between her brows deepens with each new name. When I am done, she sets the pen down. Her tone is measured the way a doctor's tone is measured when delivering bad news. Mrs. Whitfield, some of what you've told me is on its face the kind of thing that comes from a person under enormous strain. I am not dismissing you, but I am required by my job to verify before I act. Will you allow me to send a forensic technician to your home tonight to recover that bottle? Tonight, yes. Now, please. Take everything in that drawer. Take the whole drawer. Detective Hartley nods. She's already typing into her phone when Dr. Tate reappears at the corridor's far end, holding a clipboard, and the expression on her face is the expression of a woman whose suspicion has just been confirmed by a number on a page. Detective, Mrs. Whitfield. The toxicology came back. Cordelia has measurable levels of 2 centrally acting muscle relaxants and a long-acting benzodiazepine in her bloodstream. None match the prescriptions on her file. A sob breaks out of me. Then a laugh, hysterical, ugly, exhausted. Detective Hartley does not even flinch. She lifts her radio. At that exact second, a nurse appears at the corridor's far end. Mrs. Whitfield, she's awake. She's saying something. She wants you. I run. My old knees, 20 years too old for this run anyway. I push past the curtain. Della's eyes, for the first time in 4.5 years, find mine. Her cracked gray lips part. Her tongue moves, once slowly, against her teeth, and the single word that comes out of my stepdaughter's mouth on a breath thinner than a candle flame is not Mom. It is not help. It is a name. Juniper. Juniper. The name moves through me like cold water poured down the back of a thin shirt. My hand closes around the rail of Della's hospital bed for support. My knees, which had only just remembered how to run, forget how to stand. Behind me, I hear Detective Hartley step into the doorway. I do not turn around. My eyes are on my stepdaughter, whose own eyes have already begun to drift shut again, the single word having taken everything she had. Juniper, my niece, my sister Eleanor's only daughter. 26 years old that summer of 2021, with hair the color of dark honey freckles across the bridge of her nose and a half-finished nursing degree from Georgia Southern. After Eleanor died of a stroke in March, Juniper had moved into the spare room of my house, the one with the dogwood outside the window, to help me with Della while she finished her clinicals. It was June, a Tuesday afternoon. I was measuring out Della's medications onto the small kitchen tray when Juniper walked in from her shift, peeled her stethoscope off her neck, and stopped halfway through, hanging it on the hook. "Aunt Addie," she said. Her brow had drawn together, not loud, not alarmed, just careful the way a good nurse's face draws together when something does not add up. That dosage is wrong. The diazepam, that's not a 5-year maintenance dose. That's an acute sedation dose. Who wrote this? Dr. Boone, I said. Dr. Boone, she repeated, and the way she said his name made the kettle on the stove sound suddenly very loud. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Juniper did not come home from her overnight rotation at the rehab clinic out on Abercorn. Her car was found at a state park near Fort Pulaski. Her phone was in the driver's seat. Her shoes were not. The detective in 2021, a man with a tired face and a creased shirt, told me gently and conclusively that young women who lose their mothers sometimes walk away from their lives. He used the word runaway. I never used it. Not once in 4 years and 5 months. I come back into the present like a swimmer breaking the surface. The hospital monitor beeps. Della's chest rises and falls under the thin blanket. Detective Hartley is still in the doorway watching me with the patience of a woman who has seen people return from very far away. She speaks her voice low. Mrs. Whitfield. Who is Juniper? I tell her. Every word. The nursing degree, the diazepam dose, the shoes left behind. By the time I finish, the line between her brows has cut a full inch deep, and I see for the first time something hot move behind her professional face. At 7 in the morning, just after sunrise, a uniformed officer steps off the elevator carrying an evidence bag. Inside, it sealed in plastic, sits the small amber bottle from Della's bedside drawer. Detective Hartley takes it from him with 2 gloved fingers. She holds it up to the corridor light. 24 white round pills, no imprint, no label. She turns to me. Mrs. Whitfield, have you ever seen a pill like this dispensed by a legitimate American pharmacy? No, I say. My voice is hoarse from crying. Never. Neither our Detective Hartley says, have I. By 11 Friday morning, Detective Hartley has run Cordelia's full medical record history through the state nursing database. 2 names appear repeatedly in the early files, and one of them, a former licensed practical nurse named Harriet Hattie Voss, last worked Cordelia's case in late 2020, 12 weeks before being abruptly let go. Mrs. Whitfield, Detective Hartley says, Hattie Voss is now a part-time aide at a small assisted living home on Whitaker Street. Will you come with me to see her? I'm already reaching for my coat. The drive across town takes 20 minutes. Detective Hartley does not fill the air with small talk. She does not need to. The radio plays a low country station turned almost down. Outside the windshield, Savannah goes by in oak shadow and Spanish moss. My hands are folded in my lap knuckles, whitening, twisting the strap of my old handbag like a rosary. Hattie Voss is 43 years old. She has reddish blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, a small silver crucifix at her collar, and the kind of careful, watchful posture that people develop when they have been disbelieved by powerful men. The administrator of the Whitaker Street facility ushers us into a small break room that smells of coffee and lemon disinfectant. Hattie stands beside the microwave, gripping a mug of tea with both hands, the way a person holds something to keep from holding something else. Mrs. Whitfield, she says, and her voice cracks on my name. Her eyes, pale, gray-rimmed already with the redness of someone who has not slept, fill with tears that she does not let fall. I tried to tell someone. They buried my report. They buried me. Sit, Hattie, Detective Hartley says. Take all the time you need. Hattie does not sit. She speaks like a woman pulling glass out of a wound. Cordelia's intake notes from October 2020, I wrote them. I wrote that the deep tendon reflexes in her ankles did not match a complete spinal injury. I wrote that her pupillary response was inconsistent with her sedation level. I attached the notes to her chart and gave them to Dr. Boone for co-signature. The next morning, the chart had been retyped. My notes were gone. The cover sheet had a different date. A week later, I was offered a generous severance for, quote, voluntary career transition. My chest seizes again that hot, splintering pain that has visited me twice now in 12 hours. Hattie's eyes meet mine, and there is something in them I will not be able to forget for the rest of my life. Not pity, not sympathy, but recognition. 2 women, both of whom have been called confused. Mrs. Whitfield, she says, may I ask you something about Cordelia, something that may sound very strange? Anything. Did Cordelia ever blink at you in patterns, 3 short, 2 long, a pause, then again? The world stops moving. My knees fold for the second time today. Detective Hartley catches my elbow. Hattie sets down her tea and crosses the break room in 2 long strides to brace my other arm. I am crying not the dignified crying of a stoic Methodist widow, but the hot, ugly, rib-cracking sobs of a woman who has just understood all at once that for 4.5 years her stepdaughter has been signaling her every single day, and she has dismissed each signal as a meaningless tick. 3 short, 2 long. SOS. A key in my pocket for years. I never knew the lock. By the time Detective Hartley pulls her unmarked sedan onto East Jones Street that afternoon, the November sky has gone the color of a bruise that is just starting to heal. 2 patrol cars follow us. My house, the white clapboard with the dogwood out front, the place I have lived in for 31 years, looks through the windshield like a stranger's house. I no longer dare to call it home. A home does not hide things from the woman who lives in it. Detective Hartley turns off the engine. She turns to me. Mrs. Whitfield, the forensic team will sweep your home top to bottom. Living room, kitchen, study, both bathrooms, attic, the spare bedroom your niece used. We will not damage anything. Anything we take, we log. Anything we move, we photograph first. Are you ready? My answer comes out smaller than I want it to. Take everything you need. They move through the rooms with the careful, almost reverent tread of people who have learned to step around grief. A young officer photographs the kitchen drawer where the amber bottle was. Another bags the empty pill organizer. A third officer dusts the deed Vivian tried to make me sign. I stand in the doorway of Della's old hospital room, which is not really hers anymore, and I cannot quite make myself cross the threshold. It is the youngest officer, a woman perhaps 30 with a tight French braid and a steady level voice, who walks past me into the spare bedroom Juniper used to sleep in. The room has been mostly closed since 2021. The bedspread is the same. The framed photograph of Juniper at her high school graduation still sits on the dresser, dust softened around the edges. The officer kneels at the bedside. Detective Hartley, she calls back over her shoulder, her voice tight. You're going to want to come look at this. What she has found slid into the dust line where the floorboards meet the bed rail is a small, hard-shell suitcase, pale blue, about the size of a carry-on. The brand label has been peeled off, leaving a sticky rectangle. The combination lock has not been engaged. Detective Hartley pulls on a fresh pair of gloves. She kneels beside the officer. She lays the suitcase flat on the floor. She flicks the latches up. Click. Click. The lid lifts. The first thing on top is a small stack of color photographs, 8, maybe 10, held together by a rubber band that has gone brittle. Detective Hartley lifts the band off with her gloved fingertip. The top photograph is a young woman. The young woman is sitting on a thin mattress in a windowless room. Her hair, the dark honey color I used to cut on the back porch every August, is long and matted. Her cheekbones are knife-sharp. There's a thin metal cuff around her left ankle attached to a chain that runs out of frame. Her eyes, which are the same green as my dead sister, Eleanor's, are looking directly into the lens, and they are alive, and they are pleading. My legs go out from under me. The young officer with the French braid catches me under the elbows before I can hit the floor. A sound rises from somewhere beneath my breastbone, not a sob, not yet a wail, just a high cracked note that does not seem to belong to any language I have ever spoken. Tears sheet down my face. I am 68 years old and I have not held a photograph of my niece since the spring of 2021. She is alive. The pleading-eyed young woman in the windowless room is alive. Detective Hartley keeps her face still, but I can see her hand on the suitcase rim knuckles, whitening around the edge of the shell, the small black notebook in her coat pocket gripped so hard the cover bows. She lifts the next item, a square of folded knit fabric, pale blue, the color of robin's eggs. My breath stops a second time. I knitted that scarf myself on this very porch in the cold autumn of 2020. I gave it to Juniper at Christmas. She was wearing it the last time I saw her alive. Beneath the scarf, lying flat against the suitcase liner, is a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded into quarters. Detective Hartley unfolds it with the same careful, gloved patience she has used on everything else. 2 characters in dark pencil in handwriting I do not recognize. L5. Nothing more. L5. I read aloud. The letters mean nothing to me. They look like a parking garage stall, a movie theater seat, the back row of an old grade school classroom. Detective Hartley copies them into her notebook. Her hand this time is not steady. Later that night, going over the evidence log in the hospital waiting room, Detective Hartley would tell me what she believed that Hattie Voss, in the final week before she was let go in late 2020, had found the suitcase already packed and hidden elsewhere in the house, and had moved it under that bed herself behind a door. She knew I never opened because she did not know who to trust, and she could not take it with her. A woman who had been disbelieved once did not risk being caught carrying evidence. She hid it where she hoped the right person would eventually look. She closes the suitcase lid carefully, almost gently, the way you would close a door on a sleeping child. She rises to her feet. She turns to me. The expression on her face has lost its careful police neutrality. What is left is the face of a woman who has in the last 12 hours gone from professional suspicion to personal investment. Mrs. Whitfield, listen to me. We are going to confirm this through every channel available to us, fingerprint, DNA timestamp. But based on what is in this suitcase, I have to tell you professionally and personally, your niece may not be dead. The words go through me like sunlight through a long, shut window. Then a colder thought. Detective Hartley, I have not been alone in this house in 5 years. Della's nurses came and went. The pharmacy delivery boy, the plumber, Vivian, Sloan, Tobias, Pastor Silas. Anyone could have come into that bedroom while I was out, while I was asleep. Whoever placed that suitcase under that bed, they wanted it found someday. Or they wanted it kept somewhere they thought I would never look. Detective Hartley nods, twice. Her pen hovers above her open notebook. I take the photograph in my own ungloved fingers against everything Detective Hartley has just taught me about chain of custody. She does not stop me. She watches my face the way a sheriff watches a saloon door. I press the photograph to my chest and walk to the bay window of the front parlor, drawing breath that comes in shallow, ragged sobs. The afternoon light has gone gold, and there, on the slate path between my dogwood and my front gate, a man is standing. He is old, easily 70. His shoulders have the slight curve of decades spent bending over flower beds. He is holding an old straw hat. I have not seen him in 5 years, not since the autumn after the accident when Tobias dismissed him in my kitchen with a final paycheck and a thin excuse. Mason Crowley, the man who used to keep my husband's roses alive. The man at the gate was Mason Crowley. For 16 years, he had kept Bennett's roses alive, the climbing Cecile Brunners along the back fence, the stubborn Mr. Lincoln hybrid teas, by the front walk, the wild Cherokee rose that grew where it pleased and answered to nobody. He knew this yard the way a man knows a long marriage. Every soft spot in the soil, every drain that backed up in heavy rain. I had not seen him since the autumn of 2022, when Tobias handed him a final check in my own kitchen and told him his services were no longer required. I had been in Della's room when it happened. By the time I came out, Mason was gone, and Tobias was already straightening the dish towel on the oven handle as if restoring order to a room that had briefly gotten out of hand. I set the photograph of Juniper face down on the parlor windowsill gently, the way you set down something you are not ready to look at again, and walked to the front door. Mason. He turned his straw hat over in both hands, the brim worn thin where his thumbs always rested. His face, brown and seamed from decades in the Georgia sun, held an expression I had never seen on it before. Not grief, not guilt, something rawer than either of those. The look of a man who has been carrying a stone for 3 years and has finally found someone he trusts enough to set it down in front of. Mrs. Whitfield. His voice came out rough and low. I saw the police cars. I figured it was time I stopped being a coward. Detective Hartley stepped up behind my left shoulder, quiet as smoke. She did not announce herself. She simply stood, notebook open, and let the man talk. Mason talked. Mason. February of 2022, he said. Water pump on the back line had been acting up all week. You told me to get to it whenever I could. I came at night because the pressure reads different. After midnight, less draw on the main. You get a true picture of where the leak is." He paused. He turned the hat over once more. "It was around 2 in the morning. I came around the side of the house to reach the pump box by the back steps. The kitchen light was on." I said nothing. My hand had found the door frame. "I looked in through the window, not to pry, just to make sure you were all right up that late. But it wasn't you." He met my eyes and held them. It was Cordelia, standing at the kitchen counter as straight as a rake, both hands wrapped around a glass of water, drinking it down slow, not leaning, not wavering, standing the way a healthy woman stands when she's thirsty in the middle of the night. The breath went out of me all at once. Behind me, I heard Detective Hartley's pen moving fast. "I didn't know what to do with what I'd seen," Mason said. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a trick of the light through old glass. I went home. I came back the next morning to finish the pump. Tobias met me at the gate before I reached the front steps. He said my services were no longer required, handed me an envelope, told me if I repeated any foolishness I thought I'd seen the night before he had a lawyer who handled nuisance claims. His jaw tightened. I cashed the check. God forgive me. I cashed the check and I went home and I told myself it was none of my business. I thought of the calluses, the faint peppercorn small calluses on the heels of Cordelia's feet that Dr. Boone had explained away as pressure points from bed rail contact during sleep. I thought of how I had accepted that explanation without a second question because the alternative had been unthinkable. She had been walking, not stumbling, not being moved by someone else's hands, walking, upright, in my kitchen, in the dark. Every callus on those heels was a night I had slept 10 feet away and known nothing. I pressed the heel of my hand against my sternum hard and breathed. Before I could find words, a screen door slapped open across the street. Bertie Calloway came down her porch steps at a pace that a woman of 71 had no business attempting. She was still wearing her house dress. Her silver hair, usually pinned up by 8 in the morning, hung loose around her shoulders. Her face was wet. Adeline Honey. She crossed the street without looking for traffic. "I should have told you years ago. I was scared. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I caught her by both arms before she could fall against me completely. She steadied herself, gripping my wrists, and the words began coming in a rush and disorder that told me she had been holding them in for a very long time. Bertie Calloway had been my neighbor for 19 years. Since her husband Gerald passed in 2017, she'd spent most nights in the front bedroom, the window cracked for the night air, a habit she could not break regardless of the season. "That car," she said. "The black Audi, Tobias's car. It came around back, not the front, always the back lane at 2:13 in the morning. Not once, not twice. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork. I used to check the time because it woke me up and I wanted to know how regular it was." She wiped her face with the hem of her sleeve. "One night must have been spring of 2023. I got up to get water and I looked across. Your kitchen light was on. I saw Cordelia, just her back. She was standing at the sink." A shudder moved through Bertie's shoulders, and there was someone behind her, a hand on her shoulder, pressing down, like they were reminding her of something or warning her. Detective Hartley's voice came in low and precise. "Mrs. Calloway, the person behind her, could you identify them?" "No, too dark for a face, but it was a man, tall, narrow in the shoulders." I thought of Tobias's silhouette in my kitchen doorway, the way he stood erect, unhurried at ease in rooms that were not his. The truth of it settled into me with the cold, irrefutable weight of something that had always been true, waiting only for enough facts to make itself visible. Cordelia had not been allowed to lie still and waste away. She had been kept just functional enough to prevent the kind of irreversible atrophy that would make the deception medically impossible to sustain. Forced upright in the dark, in her own kitchen, while I slept in a recliner 10 feet away. Kept alive enough to be useful, kept sick enough to be controlled. Mason was still turning his hat. Bertie was still gripping my wrists. Detective Hartley was still writing. I excused myself from all three of them and walked back inside down the hall past the hospital bed that still held the indent of Della's body in the mattress. I stood at the window of Bennett's old study looking out at the darkening yard at the Cecile Brunner canes along the back fence that had gone unpruned for 3 years and now grew where they pleased just like the Cherokee rose. Bennett, I thought. You knew something was wrong. You told me in the only language you ever trusted silence and preparation, and the quiet architecture of a plan laid down long before the need arose. The phone in my apron pocket buzzed at 7:30. I did not recognize the number. I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was dry and unhurried, the voice of a man who had spent 50 years measuring every word before he released it. Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Theodore Marlowe. I was your husband's estate attorney. I've been carrying something for 5 years that Bennett asked me to keep until the right moment. I believe, given what I am hearing from Imogen Hartley's office this evening, that the right moment has arrived. A pause thin and deliberate as a blade. Your husband left you something I should have handed over 5 years ago. I am sorry for the delay. May I come to you in the morning? I looked at the indent in the mattress. I looked at the yellow blanket folded over the footboard. Yes, I said. Come at 10. Theodore Marlowe arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, the way men of his generation always arrived, neither early enough to be eager nor late enough to be rude. He was 79 years old spare and upright, with the careful posture of a man who had spent half a century behind a desk that required him to look people in the eye while delivering news they were not prepared for. His leather satchel was dark brown and worn at both bottom corners, the kind of bag that had seen the inside of too many courtrooms to bother pretending it was new. I brought him into the front parlor. I did not offer coffee. I did not think either of us had the patience for it. He sat. He set the satchel on the low table between us. He folded his hands on top of it and looked at me with the pale, steady eyes of a man who has been holding a secret for 6 years and is quietly grateful to be rid of it. Mrs. Whitfield, he said, before I open this, I need you to understand why I waited. Bennett's instructions to me were precise. He said, and I am quoting from the letter he left in my care, do not give this to Adeline unless the wolves are already inside the house. He did not want to frighten you with suspicion. He wanted you to have proof. He knew, I said. The words came out flat because there was no other shape for them. He knew before he died. He suspected. For the last 18 months of his life, he suspected that Vivian and certain parties connected to her were positioning themselves around Cordelia's future. He did not have evidence. What he had was a lawyer's instinct and 40 years of watching people reveal themselves when they believe no one is paying attention. Theodore unlatched the satchel, so he prepared. He laid 3 documents on the table. The first was a single sheet of heavy cream paper dense with legal language bearing Bennett's signature and a notary seal dated September 2019, 1 month before his death. This, Theodore said, is the amended trust instrument. Bennett restructured the Whitfield Ashby Family Trust in the final weeks of his life. He removed Cordelia as sole trustee of the discretionary fund and appointed her co-trustee alongside you. But the amendment goes further than that. He tapped the lower paragraph with one finger. In the event of Cordelia's incapacity, medical, legal, or otherwise all final decisions regarding trust assets, property transfers, and fund disbursements require the written approval of the secondary trustee. He looked at me over the paper. That is you, Mrs. Whitfield. You are the final trustee. Every document Vivian has placed in front of you over the past 5 years, every deed, every transfer form, every release of funds, none of it is legally binding without your signature, given with full knowledge of your authority. I sat with that for a moment. The parlor was very quiet. Outside, a mockingbird was working through its repertoire in the dogwood, running through 5 or 6 borrowed songs before settling on none of them. Inside, something cold and clarifying moved through my chest, not rage, not yet, but the clean, hard forerunner of it. "They couldn't touch any of it," I said slowly. 5 years. They circled this house for 5 years, and they could not move a single dollar without me. "Without you signing willingly and in ignorance of your own authority," Theodore said. "Yes, that is precisely correct. An informed trustee who refuses to sign is an obstacle they cannot remove through paperwork alone. That is why they needed me compliant, exhausted, isolated." I pressed the heel of my hand against my sternum. That is why Sloane kept suggesting I was too tired to manage things myself. Theodore did not answer that directly. He was not required to. He slid the second document across the table, a handwritten letter, 3 pages in Bennett's cramped leftward-leaning script, my name at the top. I did not read it in front of him. I folded it and held it. The third item, Theodore said, is not mine to give you. Bennett asked Pastor Hollander to keep it separately in the event that this meeting ever happened. You are to go to him directly. He will know what to do with it. He rose. He latched the satchel. He extended his hand, and I shook it, and his grip was the grip of a man who understood that an apology was owed, but that words were insufficient for it. "I am sorry it took this long," he said. Bennett chose the right person. He knew that from the beginning. I walked him to the door. I stood on the porch and watched his car, a clean, late-model sedan, the color of pewter. Nothing like Vivienne's theatrical presence, pull away from the curb with unhurried dignity. Then I turned back inside. Sloane was standing in my hallway. She had a key. She had always had a key, and until this morning I had never thought to ask for it back. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from the place on Drayton Street she had loved since she was 19, and she was wearing the expression she wore when she was trying very hard to appear as though she had not been listening through a closed door. "Mama." I knocked. "You didn't hear me." She held out a cup. "I thought you might need this." I took it. I set it on the hall table. I said, without intending to say it, "Theodore Marlowe just left." The cup in Sloane's hand tilted. Hot coffee sheeted over her fingers and down the side of the paper sleeve. She did not seem to feel it. The cup hit the hardwood floor, the lid popped off coffee, spread in a dark, slow fan across the boards she had played on as a child. She did not look at the cup. She looked at me. Her face had gone the color of old wax, and her mouth was open just slightly the way a door is open when someone has walked through it in a hurry and forgotten to pull it closed behind them. "Sloane," I said. My voice was very quiet. "How do you know that name?" She bent to pick up the cup. Her hands, I noticed, were shaking. "I don't," she said. I startled myself. I looked at my daughter, the daughter I had driven to soccer practice, and sat up with through 3 broken hearts, and walked through the rain to buy medicine for when she was 8 years old, and certain she was dying of a stomach flu. I looked at her, the way you look at something you have carried for 44 years, and are only now in the cold light of a November morning beginning to see clearly. She was still crouching over the spilled coffee, still not meeting my eyes. I thought she is not afraid of a name. She is afraid of what a name means. And I did not yet know, not fully not in the way that would keep me awake for the next 3 nights, exactly how much she already knew and how long she had known it. Before I reveal the confession that changed everything I thought I knew about this family, leave the word "still here" in the comments. I read every single one. And please be aware some details in the story ahead have been shaped for narrative purposes. You are welcome to step away here if you prefer. 2 days passed before the doctors said she was strong enough. 2 days of fluorescent corridors and bad coffee, and the particular silence of a waiting room where no one wants to make eye contact because everyone is afraid of the same thing. On Monday morning, the 24th of November, a nurse with a calm, unhurried manner led me down the hall to room 14 and told me I had 30 minutes. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Cordelia was propped against 2 pillows, her dark hair brushed back from her face. Someone on the nursing staff had done that, and the small tenderness of it nearly undid me before I even reached the chair beside her bed. Her color had come back in patches. Her eyes, when they found mine, were the eyes of a woman who had been carrying something so long that the weight of it had changed the shape of her spine. Mom. Her voice came out in pieces like something that had been left in the cold too long. I started this. I need you to know that. I started it. I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. I did not speak. 3 months, she said. That was the deal. Tobias came to me in January of 2024, months before the accident. He said the care fund was being mismanaged. He said if I agreed to a short medical leave, fake a slow recovery from a minor injury just long enough for him and Vivian to restructure the accounts, he would make sure I received my fair share before the whole thing was reorganized. She paused, swallowed. I told myself it was just paperwork, a technicality. 3 months and then I would stand up and walk out and no one would be hurt. Her right hand moved to her face. Her fingernails dragged slowly down the side of her nose, not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to leave a faint red line, the gesture of a woman who has run out of other ways to punish herself. Her shoulders had begun to shake in the slow, rhythmic way of someone trying very hard not to make a sound while crying. I watched her. My hands, flat on my knees, had gone white at every knuckle. The metal edge of the chair's armrest pressed into my palm, and I did not move away from it. When did you want to stop? My voice came out quieter than I expected. June, she said. June of 2020, 3 months in. I told Tobias I was done. I told him I would tell you everything. A tear slid from the corner of her eye, and she did not wipe it. The next morning, my vitamin supplements tasted different. I thought I was imagining it. By the end of that week, I couldn't hold a pen steady. By the end of the month, I couldn't stand without the room spinning. She looked at the ceiling. I understood then what I had walked into. The room was very quiet. The monitor beside her bed drew its slow green line, indifferent and steady. The blink pattern. I said, 3 short, 2 long. I learned it from a book Bennett gave me, Maritime Distress Signals. She turned her face toward mine for the first time since I had sat down. Her eyes were full. I tried every day, Mom, every single day. I watched you read it as a nervous tick and look away, and I couldn't make you understand without... Her voice broke completely. She pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth. I looked at my stepdaughter. I thought of 10,000 mornings, of oatmeal gone cold, of the yellow blanket washed so many times it had gone the color of weak tea. I thought of a promise made at a graveside in October of 2019, and the particular cruelty of the fact that I had kept it perfectly, and it had not been enough because the danger was never the thing I had been told to fear. I was crying. I did not know precisely when I had started. Neither of us reached for the other. We simply sat in the particular grief of 2 women who have each failed the other in ways that cannot be cleanly assigned or forgiven in a single morning, and wept without looking up. Then she said it, quietly, the way you say the thing you have saved for last because you knew it would cost the most. They told me, if I told you they'd hurt Juniper. The armrest bit into my palm. I let it. She came to me, Cordelia said, the summer of 2021. She had already figured out the dosage was wrong. She told me she was going to report it. I begged her not to. I was so afraid. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. 3 days later, she was gone. And Vivian sat at the foot of my bed and told me that was what happened to people who asked the wrong questions. I stood up. My legs were not entirely reliable, but they held. I pressed Bennett's letter, still folded, still unread, all the way through against my sternum over my heart, and I walked to the door. I pulled it open. The corridor of Memorial Health stretched away in both directions under the long, humming fluorescent lights. To the left, the nurses' station. To the right, the elevator bank. and at the far end of the right corridor, perhaps 40 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, standing with the patient, unhurried stillness of a man who is accustomed to waiting in hospitals, was Dr. Ezra Boone. He was not looking at a chart. He was not speaking to a nurse. He was looking at me. And when our eyes met across the length of that corridor, he did not look away. Dr. Boone smiled when he saw me walking toward him. The same warm, unhurried smile he had given me across 5 years of kitchen table consultations and bedside check-ins, the smile of a man who had made a career out of making frightened people feel foolish for being frightened. But something in me had been permanently recalibrated in the last 72 hours, and I saw it now with absolute clarity. That smile was a performance. It had always been a performance. Adeline! He opened his hands easy and open. I heard about last night. How is she holding up? She's talking, I said. I opened the folder I was carrying and held 2 pages up between us side by side. Tell me something, Ezra. Your signature on the June 2020 chart and your signature on the March 2022 chart. Look at the loop on the capital B, the cross on the lowercase t. They are not the same hand. My voice came out steady. I do not know how. My heart was slamming so hard against my ribs, I could feel it in my jaw. And this entry, November 12, 2021, is word for word identical to the entry from February 14th of the same year. Same sentence, same punctuation, same typo on the word deterioration. I tapped the page hard enough that the paper snapped. You copy-pasted a patient's medical record, Ezra. You didn't even bother changing the date in the body of the note. His smile thinned, not gone thinned, the way a man's smile thins when he is still calculating whether charm can get him out of a room. Mistakes happen, Adeline, he said softly. Old age makes us misread things, makes us see patterns that... Dr. Boone. The voice came from behind his left shoulder. He turned and the calculation in his face evaporated in an instant, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Detective Imogen Hartley stood 2 feet away, badge in hand, her expression carrying the particular patience of a woman who had been waiting for this exact moment since 4 o'clock that morning. I'd like you to come with me, she said. You are not under arrest at this time. I do, however, strongly encourage you not to make this morning more complicated than it needs to be. Boone's mouth opened, closed. He looked back at me once, searching my face for something mercy or hesitation or some small crack he could wedge himself through. He found nothing. Imogen touched his elbow and he went. I leaned my back against the corridor wall, pressed both palms flat against the cold surface, and breathed until my legs decided to work again. By noon, Imogen had taken me across town to a narrow pharmacy on Broughton Street, a place that had been on that block since my mother's time, still run by the same family that opened it. Otis Brennan was 63, broad-shouldered and deliberate with reading glasses on a cord around his neck, and the permanently careful eyes of a man who had spent 40 years making sure he gave people exactly what was written on the paper in front of him, and not 1 milligram more. He shook my hand the moment I walked through the door. His grip was warm and heavy with apology. "I kept it," he said before Imogen had asked a single question. "August 2022. Woman came in 3 times that summer. Always cash. Always a compound I had to special order. Something about it sat wrong with me, so I copied the footage to a hard drive before the system wiped it." He rubbed the side of his jaw. Told myself I'd know when the right time was to do something with it. Took me 3 years and a police call. His voice dropped. I'm ashamed of that. He pulled up the footage on an old desktop in the back office. The timestamp read August 9th, 2022, 11:14 in the morning. A woman in a pale linen blazer stepped up to the counter, her face turned just slightly from the camera, but not far enough. The jawline was unmistakable, the pewter hair, the precise proprietary way she carried herself in a room. Eleanor Vale. I read from the counter. Slip Otis had pulled alongside the footage. The name hit me like a fist behind the sternum. Eleanor, my sister's name. My sister who died of a stroke in March of 2021, 14 months before this footage was taken. Vivienne had reached into my family's grief and pulled out a dead woman's name to use as a disguise, and she had done it without flinching. My fingers found the edge of the counter and gripped it, and the small tray of sample bottles rattled, and one rolled off the edge and hit the floor, and I could not make myself let go. "There's more," Otis said, his voice carefully quiet. He tapped the keyboard. The footage advanced 30 seconds. The pharmacy door opened. A younger woman stepped inside, moving with the easy, untroubled familiarity of someone who had been here before and had no reason in the world to be nervous about it. She set a paper coffee bag on the counter beside Vivian's elbow. Vivian reached over and patted her hand. My daughter's hand. Sloane was smiling, not a strained smile, not an uncomfortable one. A bright, relaxed, open smile, the smile of a woman who was exactly where she had chosen to be, doing exactly what she had chosen to do, and felt absolutely fine about it. Oh, God. The words tore out of me before I could swallow them. A sob cracked loose from my chest, ugly, involuntary, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Tears scalded my cheeks. My knees buckled just slightly, and my grip on the counter pulled the tray forward another inch, rattling everything on it. The pain in my chest was not grief anymore. It was something sharper, something that had a precise location right behind the place I had carried my daughter for 9 months before she ever took a breath. Otis reached over and switched the monitor off. He bowed his head over his folded hands and breathed slowly. I should have called someone. He said, his voice thick with it. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I am so sorry." I straightened. I pressed one hand hard against my sternum and held it there. Then I took out my phone and dialed. Sloane picked up on the second ring, her voice bright with careful, practiced warmth. "Mama. How are you? I was just thinking about—" "Come to the house tonight," I said. 9 o'clock, just you. I paused. "I need to hear it from you, Sloane. Not from a lawyer, not from a courtroom. From you. Can you do that?" A silence on her end, then quietly, "Okay, Mama." I hung up. I looked at the blank screen where my daughter had been smiling 30 seconds before. And I thought I have earned the right to hear this from her own mouth, whatever it costs me, whatever is left of me after. 7 o'clock. 2 hours earlier than I had asked. I heard her car before I saw the headlights, that old silver sedan she had driven since the divorce, the one with the dent on the rear bumper she never bothered to fix. She could not wait, or would not. I was not sure which was worse. I was standing at the kitchen window with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I had not touched once. The doorbell rang. I did not move for 3 full seconds. Then I opened the door. Sloane stood on the porch holding a white pastry box tied with a red ribbon, Sullivan's Bakery on Whitaker Street, the place she had begged me to take her every Saturday morning when she was 6 years old. Lemon glazed twists, her favorite. She was smiling, but the smile did not reach her eyes, and her eyes were already too bright, the way eyes get when a person has been crying in the car and trying to hide it. "Mama," she said, that one word, like nothing had happened, like 5 years had not passed. I stepped aside to let her in. I did not smile back. She set the bakery box on the kitchen table, smoothed the ribbon once with her thumb, a nervous habit she had carried since childhood, and turned to face me. "I made tea," she started. "I thought maybe we could—" "Sit down, Sloane." She sat. I opened the laptop. No preamble, no softening. I pressed play. The pharmacy footage was grainy shot from a high corner angle, the timestamp burned in white, in the lower right, August 9th, 2022. 11:14 a.m. A woman in a pale blazer stood at the counter, cash in hand, giving a name that was not her own. And then 4 seconds later, a younger woman walked through the glass door behind her. Dark coat, hair pulled back. A paper coffee bag in one hand passed quietly, almost casually, to the woman in the blazer. I watched Sloane watch herself on that screen. Her face did not crumble all at once. It went in stages, the jaw first, then the throat, then the shoulders, and finally her whole body folded forward like something had been cut loose inside her chest. She pressed both hands over her mouth. The sound that came out was not a word. It was the sound of a person who had been holding something too heavy for too long and had finally let it drop. Sloan. My voice was low, controlled. Every muscle in my body was working to keep it that way. Start at the beginning. She lifted her head. Her mascara had tracked 2 dark lines down her cheeks. Mama, The beginning. She told me. The divorce had been final in January 2020. The debt, the kind that comes from a marriage built on someone else's credit, had followed her into the new year, like a second shadow. Tobias had found her in February. Not by accident. He had been looking. He knew about the debt, knew about the missed payments, knew she had borrowed against her retirement fund. He sat across from her at a coffee shop on Drayton Street and told her all he needed was a schedule. Cordelia's care schedule, the medication log, a copy of the signature block from the trust documents. Just administrative details, he had said. Nothing that would hurt anyone. I knew it was wrong, Sloan said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I knew it the moment I said yes, but I told myself it was a one-time thing, that nobody would get hurt. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her the way I had looked at her the morning she was born with everything I had, and I felt something shift permanently inside me. You looked me in the face, I said. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call. You looked me in the face. You loved her more than me. The words came out raw, stripped of all pretense. You chose Cordelia. You gave 5 years to a woman who is not even your blood, and Sloan. I placed my hands flat on the table between us, the same hands that had held her through a fever of 39 degrees when she was 4 years old, the same hands that had braided her hair every school morning for 6 years. I did not raise them. I did not reach for her. I never chose. You stopped coming home. The silence between us was not empty. It was the loudest thing I had ever heard. That was when the back door opened. Detective Imogen Hartley walked in quietly the way she always did, as though the ground itself made room for her. She was carrying a folder, and she set it on the table beside the laptop without a word. I already knew what was inside. She had shown me that morning. Sloan looked at the folder, then at Imogen, then at me. Sloan Whitfield. Imogen said, I need you to look at this document. Sloan opened it with trembling fingers. It was a petition, application for appointment of guardian of the person and property of Adeline Ruth Whitfield, filed with the Superior Court of Chatham County, scheduled for submission the following Tuesday. At the bottom, in her own handwriting, was Sloan's signature. The petition declared that I was cognitively impaired, that I could no longer manage my own affairs, that Sloan should be appointed my legal guardian and by extension the administrator of the Whitfield Ashby Family Trust. Sloan's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. I was going to withdraw it. I swear I was going to. Sloan Whitfield. Imogen's voice was not unkind, but it did not bend. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation fraud upon the court and accessory to unlawful imprisonment. Sloan looked at me one last time as Imogen moved around the table. Her eyes were asking something I did not know how to answer, not because I lacked the words, but because some questions have no answer that will ever be enough. She was still crying when the handcuffs closed. I did not cry. Not then. I stood at the kitchen window and watched Imogen guide my daughter to the car outside, and I held my own elbows and I breathed. The pastry box was still on the table. The red ribbon was still tied. When Imogen came back inside 5 minutes later, she found me sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, my knees drawn up my face, buried in my hands. She did not say anything. She sat down on the floor beside me and stayed. That night, I believed it was the worst night of my life. I was wrong. The worst night had not yet come. He came at 7:15 in the morning, the way he always came quietly without calling ahead, as if he had learned long ago that grief does not keep office hours. Pastor Silas Hollander stood on my porch in his old wool coat, with a small maplewood box tucked under one arm and his wool cap in his free hand, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally reached the person he was meant to give it to. Addie. His voice was rough with the kind of emotion that old men carry sideways, never quite head on. I heard about Sloan last night. I am so sorry. My throat tightened so hard I had to press my lips together for a full second before I could speak. Come inside, Silas, please. He followed me into the parlor. He sat in the wingback chair beside the window, the chair Bennett used to read in on Sunday afternoons, and he set the box on his knees and looked at it for a moment before he looked at me. Bennett gave me this in the spring of 2015, he said. He came to me after Sunday service, calm as you please, and he handed me this box and said, Silas, keep this somewhere dry and somewhere safe, and do not give it to Adeline until the day it cannot make things any worse than they already are. His eyes, pale and watery and very kind, met mine across the parlor. Last night was that day, I think. My hands reached for the box before my mind caught up with the motion. The wood was smooth, the grain tight and fine, sealed with a small brass latch that clicked open without resistance. Inside, nestled in a square of faded green, felt were three things: a folded letter in Bennett's handwriting, a silver USB drive no bigger than my thumb, and a strip of paper with 7 numbers written in pencil. I unfolded the letter. Bennett's handwriting cramped, leftward-leaning the handwriting of a left-handed man who had been forced to write with his right as a boy and never quite forgave the world for it filled both sides of the page. My eyes burned before I had read the first full sentence. Addie, if you are reading this, then I was right, and I am more sorry than I know how to say that I was. I spent the last 2 years of my life hoping I was wrong. I wanted to be wrong more than I have ever wanted anything. I am sorry I left you alone with this. Look at the USB. Open the safe at the old house. The combination is on the strip of paper. The truth was never about the money. It was never about the trust. The money was just the door they needed to open so they could get to what was behind it. I love you. I have always loved you. Take care of our girl. A sob tore out of me so fast and so hard it sounded like something breaking. I pressed the letter against my chest, both arms crossed over it, and bent forward in my chair, and Pastor Hollander leaned across and put one large, dry, steady hand on my shoulder and kept it there while I shook. He knew. I managed when I could speak again. My voice was wrecked and thin. He knew the whole time. He suspected, Silas said gently. And he loved you too much to tell you what he only suspected. He wanted proof first. He just ran out of time to find it. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I opened the laptop on the side table. I pushed the USB in. The drive contained 3 folders. The first held 47 scanned documents, contracts dated between 1989 and 1997. Some bearing the letterhead of a Savannah real estate firm that had dissolved in 2001. Others appearing to be shell company filings with signatures that did not match the names printed beneath them. Money moving in circles in amounts large enough to matter and structured carefully enough to hide. The second folder held 12 photographs, black and white, slightly grainy, the quality of images taken from a distance, with a long lens. A woman in her mid-20s, unmistakably Vivian, even then the same jaw and the same proprietary posture, standing outside what appeared to be a government building. Beside her, a man in a suit whose face was turned partly away from the camera. On the back of one photograph, Bennett had written a name I recognized from county commission news stories going back 20 years, and from a bronze plaque on the wall of a public library I had driven past 100 times without thinking twice about it. That man, I said, my voice dropping to almost nothing. He's still very much alive, Pastor Hollander said. Still very much in a position to lose everything if those documents see the light of a courtroom. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Addie, the trust, was a distraction. The house on Bull Street was the target. Whatever is in that safe behind the fireplace, Vivian has been trying to reach it for 5 years. Every deed she pushed at you, every paper Tobias laid on your kitchen table, it was all just a way to get legal access to that house and whatever is inside it. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the armrest. 5 years, I said. They poisoned Della and held Juniper hostage and turned my own daughter against me for paperwork. For paperwork that could put people in federal prison, Silas said quietly. For paperwork that ends careers and legacies and the kind of reputation that gets buildings named after you. That is a different category of motive entirely. I nodded. I was still nodding when I clicked open the third folder on the USB. It held a single scanned image, a hospital birth record. The paper was old, the font the kind used by Georgia hospital forms in the early 1990s. A baby boy. Born November 14, 1991 at Memorial Health Medical Center, the same hospital where Della was recovering 2 miles from where I was sitting. Mother's name typed in the field provided Vivian Ashby. Father's name left blank. I looked at the birth year. I looked at the name. Then I thought of Tobias Renfield, 34 years old, who had appeared in this family's life as a distant cousin on the Ashby side, through a connection thin enough that I had never once been able to trace its line on the family tree. I counted. Then I counted again. My hand pressing flat against the page had begun to tremble. 34 years. Tobias was 34 years old. The baby on that birth record would be 34 years old if he was still alive. I counted a second time slowly, deliberately, the way you recount a sum when the answer is too large to trust, and came up with the same number both times. Silas. My voice came out like gravel dragged across tin. Look at this. Pastor Hollander leaned forward and took the printout from my shaking hand. He put his reading glasses on. He read the date. He read the mother's name. He sat back in the chair and let out a long, slow breath through his nose, the breath of a man who has suspected something for years and has just been handed the confirmation he never wanted to hold. "Good Lord," he said softly. "Tobias Renfield," I said. He came into this family as Cordelia's distant cousin on the Ashby side, a connection nobody could quite trace, thin as smoke. I pressed my palm flat on the table to keep my hand from shaking harder. Renfield is the name of his foster father. It is not his blood name. His blood name is right there on that page, and his mother's name is right there beside it, and the man whose name is missing from the father's field is currently sitting on the Chatham County Commission with a library named after him. Hollander took his glasses off. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers hard. If those documents in the safe go public, Tobias loses everything, I said, and my voice cracked on the last word because the scale of it was only now landing on me, fully the full, terrible architectural weight of what had been built against me. Not just money, his entire identity, his political connections, the career he has built on a name and a bloodline that aren't even his, and Vivian. My throat closed. I swallowed hard. Vivian spent 34 years hiding a son she had with a man she was helping to defraud the public. Every document in that safe is a nail in both their coffins. "This is why they needed the house," Hollander said. He reached across and gripped my forearm firm and steady the grip of a man who has spent 50 years anchoring other people to the ground when the ground moved. Not the trust. Not the money, the house, the safe behind that fireplace. Bennett found the thread Addie. He just couldn't pull it all the way through before his heart gave out. I pressed both hands over my face. Tears burned behind my eyes, and I let them come, not the wrenching sobs of the night before, but the quieter, hotter tears of a woman who is finally understanding the true shape of the thing that has been destroying her life. My shoulders shook. My breath came in stutters. Hollander kept his hand on my arm and did not let go. By noon, Imogen was in my kitchen with a laptop and a phone pressed to her ear. She had sent the USB contents to the FBI field office in Atlanta that morning, and the agent on the other end of the call had, by the sound of his responses, stopped whatever else he was doing. "Wider than we thought," Imogen said when she hung up, snapping her notebook shut with a sound like a small door closing. "Way wider. The commission connection alone opens 3 separate federal investigations that have been cold for years." She looked at me across the table with the focused, direct gaze of a woman who has learned to deliver hard truths cleanly. "Mrs. Whitfield, I want you to know what Bennett did. Preserving that evidence, making sure it survived him, that is the reason this case has any legs at all. Your husband saved this from the inside." My chin trembled. I pressed my lips together until it stopped. "He couldn't save himself," I said. "No," she said, and her voice was very gentle. "He couldn't, but he saved you." That evening, I drove to the hospital alone. The November dark came early now, the street lamps on Drayton Street blinking on one by one as I passed beneath them, and the city looked the way it always looked in late autumn, beautiful and tired and full of things it was keeping to itself. Cordelia was awake when I pushed open the door of room 14. Her color was better. The grayness had retreated from her lips. She was propped against her pillows with her hands loose at her sides, and when she saw me, her eyes filled immediately, fast and helpless, the way eyes fill when a person has been alone, with too many thoughts for too many hours. "Mom." Her voice was still rough, still working its way back from years of near silence. "I heard about Sloan. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he used her against you, against both of us." "Hush." I sat in the chair beside her bed and took her hand between both of mine. Her fingers were thin. Her knuckles felt like small stones. "You have nothing to be sorry for tonight. You have done enough being sorry." She nodded. She pulled a slow breath. Then her eyes steadied and she began to blink. Deliberately, carefully, 3 short, 2 long. Pause. 3 short, 2 long. I already had Hattie's chart in my coat pocket. I had carried it there since the morning I understood what it meant. I spread it open on the bedside table, my finger moving from symbol to symbol, while Cordelia's eyes kept their patient, insistent rhythm. LAKE pause. FIVE long pause. JUNIPER pause. ALIVE. My finger stopped moving on the page. My whole body stopped. The monitor beside the bed drew its green lines, slow and steady and indifferent, and I sat there with the chart in my hands and 4 years of grief shifting inside my chest like ice breaking up in a river after a long winter. "She's alive," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper, torn at the edges. "Juniper is alive." Cordelia's eyes filled over. "I heard them talking," she said, her voice cracking. "Last spring, Tobias on the phone. He said she was at the lake house, room 5. I've been trying to tell you for months, Mom. I've been trying so hard." The tears came then, not from grief, not from anger, but from the particular, unbearable sweetness of hope, arriving 4 years too late and right on time. I pressed Cordelia's hand against my face and cried the way I had not cried since the day Bennett died openly without managing it, without caring who heard. The paper slipped from the blue suitcase. L5. Lake 5. I had held the answer in my hands in that spare bedroom and not known what I was holding. Juniper was alive. 4 years of carrying her like a stone in my chest, and she was alive. Tonight, for the first time since the summer of 2021, I cried because I had reason to hope, and it felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. I had fallen asleep in the chair beside Cordelia's bed, sometime after midnight, her hand still loosely folded in mine, the monitor beside us, drawing its patient green line through the dark. When my phone buzzed against the armrest at 6:50 in the morning, the vibration ran straight up my arm and into my chest before I was fully awake. I looked at the screen. My whole body went cold. Vivian. I let it ring 3 full times. Not because I needed to compose myself, I was past composing, but because I wanted her to wait. I wanted her to feel for 3 seconds what it was like to be on the wrong end of someone else's patience. I picked up. "Vivienne. Adeline, dear." Her voice came through the line like warm honey poured over broken glass, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath every syllable. "I heard about poor Sloane. Dreadful business. I do hope you're holding up." My jaw tightened so hard I felt it in my back teeth. "What do you want?" "We need to talk, privately. The old house on Bull Street, 11 o'clock this morning. Just the two of us, the way sensible women settle things." A pause precisely calculated. And Adeline come alone. No police, no detective friends, no lawyers. Another pause, softer and far more dangerous than the first. "If anyone follows you, Juniper will never come home." The line went dead. I sat in the gray hospital light with the phone in my lap and my heart slamming so hard against my ribs I could feel it in my fingertips, and I breathed through my nose and counted to 8, and then I called Imogen Hartley. She picked up on the first ring. "I heard," she said. "We already have the call flagged. Give me 20 minutes. By 8 o'clock, Imogen was in the hospital family room with 2 FBI agents, a broad-shouldered man named Caldwell and a younger woman named Reyes, both out of the Atlanta field office, and Theodore Marlowe, who had driven down from his office on Drayton Street with a folder of documents and the quiet urgency of a man who understood exactly what the next 3 hours required. "Here is how this works," Imogen said, spreading a map of the Bull Street property across the table. "Mrs. Whitfield goes in wired. Georgia is a one-party consent state. She is a participant in the conversation, which means everything recorded is fully admissible in court. We will have eyes on the exterior of the house and audio monitoring from 2 blocks out." She looked at me directly. "You will not be alone in that building, Mrs. Whitfield. You will feel alone. You will not be." "And Juniper." My voice came out thin and urgent. "The lake house." "Judge Harmon signed the federal search warrant at 5:47 this morning," Agent Caldwell said. His voice was flat and calm, the voice of a man who had done this enough times to have moved through fear and out the other side. "The tactical team is already in position at Lake 5. They move at 11 o'clock simultaneous with your entry into the Bull Street property. We do not want Vivienne or Tobias receiving any communication from the Lake House team before you have them in that room." Theodore slid the folder across the table toward me. "Dummy transfer documents," he said, "formatted identically to the real trust instruments. I have been keeping a template ready for the better part of a year. Since the moment Imogen first called me in November, I knew this day was coming. I did not know when." He looked at me over his glasses. "Bennett taught me to prepare before the crisis, not during it." "If she asks you to sign, you sign. The documents have no legal effect whatsoever. I've embedded 3 separate invalidating clauses in the fine print that no one reading quickly would catch." He looked at me over his glasses. "Let her think she's won. That is the moment she will say everything she needs to say." I nodded. My hands flat on the table were trembling faintly, and I did not try to stop them. At 10:15, I stood outside Cordelia's room, one hand on the door frame. The wire was already taped flat against my sternum beneath my blouse, thin as a whisper, warm from my skin. I pushed the door open. Cordelia was sitting up in bed, more upright than I had seen her since the accident. Her eyes found me the moment I stepped inside, and what was in them made my throat close completely. A fear so naked and so fierce that it looked almost like anger. "You're going," she said. Not a question. "I'm going." "Mama." The word came out of her broken and fierce all at once. She reached across the blanket and grabbed my hand with both of hers, her grip stronger than I expected the grip of a woman whose hands remembered what it felt like to hold on before 5 years of forced stillness taught them to let go. "Come back. You hear me? You come back to me." My eyes burned. I squeezed her hands until I felt her knuckles press back against mine. "I will," I said. "I promise you. And when I do, Juniper will be with me." A sob broke in her chest, short and hard like a fault line giving way. She pressed my hand against her cheek and held it there, and I felt the wet heat of her tears against my palm, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then I gently pulled free because if I stayed another minute, I would not be able to make myself leave. I drove to Bull Street alone. The November morning was cold and clear, the live oaks throwing long shadows across the road, the Spanish moss hanging perfectly still in air that had no wind in it at all. I turned onto Bull Street at 10:47. The old house rose up at the end of the block, 3 stories of pale stucco and dark shutters. Bennett's grandfather's house, the house where the fireplace in the back parlor hid a safe that had been waiting 7 years for someone to open it. My hands gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles had gone white. "I am the trustee," I said out loud to no one, to the empty car, to Bennett, wherever he was listening. "I am the trustee. I am the trustee." I said it 3 times. It did not stop my hands from shaking, but it kept my foot on the accelerator, and that was enough. I parked at the curb. I walked up the front path. The old iron gate swung open with the familiar 2-note creak that had not changed in 30 years, and I climbed the porch steps and raised my hand and knocked. The door opened. The hinges groaned the way old houses groan, low and slow, as if the house itself were reluctant. Vivian stood in the center of the hallway, hands folded at her waist, dressed in dove gray as if she were attending a luncheon. Her face held the particular, composed expression of a woman who has decided the performance is over. Behind her, one hand resting on the newel post of the staircase, stood Tobias. His jaw was set hard. His eyes were flat. He looked at me the way a man looks at an obstacle he has already decided how to remove. They did not smile. They did not offer pleasantries. They did not pretend anymore. Neither did I. The hallway of the old house on Bull Street smelled the way it had always smelled: beeswax and old paper, and the faint ghost of Bennett's pipe tobacco that had worked itself so deep into the plaster over 40 years that no amount of airing had ever fully dislodged it. I had walked this hallway 1,000 times. I had kissed my husband goodbye at the foot of these stairs. I had stood at this window on a January morning in 2020 and watched the ambulance carry Cordelia away and believed completely that she was broken. I walked in and I did not flinch. Vivian had arranged herself in the center of the parlor doorway with the practiced composure of a woman who'd been managing rooms her entire life. The dove gray suit, the pewter hair, the hands folded just so. But her eyes? Her eyes were doing something I had never seen in them before. They were calculating. Not warmly, not even pretending to be warm. The performance was over, and what was left underneath it was cold and functional, and very, very focused on the folder on the parlor table. "Come in, Adeline." Her voice had the quality of a door being held open under duress. "We don't have a great deal of time." I stepped into the parlor. Tobias was at the fireplace, one hand on the mantelpiece, the other loose at his side, but his eyes kept sliding left to the iron surround of the fireplace, to the mortared stone behind the grate where Bennett had built the safe 30 years ago and never told a single member of Vivian's family it existed. Left, back to me, left again. The knowledge of what was inside that wall was written all over him, tight in his jaw, twitching at his temple, in a thin blue vein that pulsed visibly with every heartbeat. Vivian slid the folder across the parlor table. Transfer of trustee authority. My name in the designated field. A line waiting for my signature. "Sign it," she said. "The trust transfers. You walk out of here. Everyone goes home. Where is Juniper?" My voice came out level. I was proud of that. Vivian's composure tightened by 1 degree. "Juniper is comfortable. She will remain so. Sign the document." "I don't pick up that pen," I said, "until I know she is breathing and unharmed. Those are my terms. You asked me here to negotiate, so negotiate." Something shifted in Vivian's face. The last layer of politeness dissolved, and what came through underneath was 60 years of contempt she had never once, in all the time I had known her, allowed herself to show me directly. Her chin rose. Her lip thinned. "You don't get to make demands, old woman." The words hit the room like a stone thrown through glass. 4 years of Dear Adeline and how are you holding up, and you are such a devoted woman, and underneath every syllable of all of it, always this. Exactly this. I felt it land in my sternum like a struck bell, and I felt my eyes go hot, and I blinked twice hard and held my chin level and did not look away from her. "Pick up the pen," she said. I reached for it. My hand, genuinely not by performance, shook. I fumbled. The pen rolled to the edge of the table and dropped to the floor with a small, hollow tap. "My hand shakes," I said. "Old age. Pick it up." Her voice cracked on the last word, the first crack in the surface I had seen. I bent down slowly. Behind me, I heard Tobias move, restless pacing, unable to stop himself from drifting back toward the fireplace, like a man orbiting something he cannot leave alone. When I straightened, he was 3 feet from the iron surround fingers trailing the stone-edged jaw so tight the muscle twitched in his cheek. The vein at his temple had darkened. His knuckles on the mantelpiece had gone the color of old chalk. "Stop stalling," he said low and tight, each word clipped to its minimum. "Sign it or we make a call right now and change the situation at the lake." Then Vivian's phone rang. She pulled it from her jacket without looking, saw the number of the lake house, and raised it to her ear with the reflex of a woman who has been waiting for this call and is relieved it finally came. "What is it?" A pause. Her brow tightened. "What do you mean, there are, who is this? Who are you?" Another pause longer, and the color began to leave her face the way color leaves a room when someone turns the light off. "That is not, you have no right to." The voice on the other end of the line was unhurried and entirely unmistakable. I had heard it at 3 in the morning in a hospital corridor and in my own kitchen, and in a pharmacy back office that smelled of cardboard and old coffee. Detective Imogen Hartley said, "Good morning, Vivian. Put your hands where I can see them." The front door of the old house came off its frame with a sound like a gunshot. They moved fast, 4 officers in tactical gear, 2 through the front, 2 from the back hallway, filling the parlor in under 4 seconds, with the compact, controlled speed of people who have done this until it requires no thought at all, commands sharp and overlapping. Someone had Vivian by the elbow before she finished lowering the phone. The cuffs went on with a sound that cut through everything else in the room. Vivienne did not scream. She stood with her hands behind her back, and her chin still raised, stubborn, furious, and reduced, and her fingers worked the fabric of her blazer into a knot, gripping and releasing, as if trying to hold on to something that had already slipped irretrievably past her reach. Tobias did not go quietly. He wheeled toward the fireplace with a speed that surprised everyone in the room, including me, his face gone completely past calculation into something animal and desperate. A sound tore out of him, not a word, not a name, something older and rawer than language. He drove his fist into the stone facing of the fireplace with a crack that turned my stomach, and the knuckle split open, and blood ran dark and fast across the pale stone, and he was still reaching, still pulling, both hands scrabbling at the iron surround, trying to get to the safe behind the grate before anyone could stop him. "The file," his voice broke apart on the words, ragged and guttural, the voice of a man watching 34 years come down all at once. "Get the file." 3 officers had him. He kept fighting them for 10 seconds that felt like much longer, kept trying to drag himself back toward the fireplace before the strength went out of him all at once, and his legs buckled, and they held him up and walked him out. I had not moved from my position behind the chair. My hands were on the back rail. My knuckles, I noticed, had gone completely white. I became aware in the sudden relative quiet after the shouting and the boots on the hardwood and the crack of Tobias's fist on the stone that I was breathing. that I had been holding my breath in short, seized increments since the door came open, and that I was now breathing out. One long, slow, complete exhale. The first one it felt like in 5 years. Imogen stepped through the front door. She crossed the room in 4 strides and stopped beside me. She looked at my face for a moment, and then she put one hand on my shoulder, firm, warm, brief, and raised her radio with the other. The voice that came back through the static was male-clipped and carrying underneath its professional calm a quality I recognized even through the interference. Relief. "Detective Hartley, we have her. We have the boy. They're alive." The rail of the chair bent under my grip. Tears came down my face before I decided to cry hot and fast and completely beyond my control, and I pressed my free hand over my mouth and made a sound that had no name in any language I knew. The sound of a woman who has been wrong in the best possible way about the most important thing. They were alive. Juniper, the boy, both of them, alive. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The November sun was low and white over the water as Imogen turned her sedan down a gravel road I had never been on before, through a stand of loblolly pines that opened suddenly onto a gray-green stretch of lake. 4 years. 4 years I had carried my niece in the past tense, had spoken her name in the careful past tense way you learn to speak the name of someone you have accepted is gone. 4 years of lighting a candle for her at St. Andrew's on the anniversary of the day she disappeared of watering the dogwood in the front yard, because she had planted it the spring she moved in, of keeping her room the way she left it, because I could not bring myself to change it and could not explain why to anyone who asked. Imogen parked at the end of the gravel road. She turned off the engine and looked at me. "Ready?" My throat was too tight for words. I nodded. The lake house was a low-weathered structure, white paint gone gray with humidity, the kind of place rented by fishermen in March and forgotten the rest of the year. A yellow evidence tape line crossed the front porch. 2 FBI agents in jackets stood at the door. Agent Caldwell met us on the steps and walked us around to the back down a narrow hall that smelled of mildew and old carpet to a door at the very end marked with a painted 5. Room 5, L5. The slip of paper from the blue suitcase. The door was open. I stepped through. The room was small, a single window with an iron security grill bolted over the frame, a narrow bed, a folding table. Everything in it had the particular quality of a space that had been lived in for a very long time by someone trying to make it livable, by force of will alone. A child's drawing was taped to the wall above the bed, crayon figures, 3 of them, holding hands under a yellow sun. In the corner, a small stack of library books. On the windowsill, a row of pine cones arranged by size. Juniper was sitting on the bed. She was thin in a way that made my chest seize thin in the way that is not a diet, but a deprivation. Cheekbones sharp as knife-edges wrists I could have circled with one hand. Her hair, the dark honey color I had trimmed on the back porch every August, was long, now past her shoulders and roughly braided. But her eyes were exactly the same as they had always been, the same green as her mother Eleanor's, alive and fierce, and at the moment I walked through the door filling so fast with tears that she could not have stopped them even if she had tried. "Aunt Addie!" Her voice came out in pieces cracked and raw and barely above a whisper, the voice of someone who has not spoken above a murmur in years out of habit and caution, and the long discipline of keeping quiet when kept. She stood up from the bed and her legs shook under her, and she crossed the 3 steps between us and fell against me, and I caught her. She weighed nothing. She weighed everything. My arms closed around her, and I felt her shoulders begin to shake small rhythmic tremors, like a boat rocking in shallow water, and the sob that came out of her had no sound at all, just breath and shuddering, and the way a body releases something it has held for 4 years when it finally finds a safe place to let it go. I pressed my face into her hair, and I held on, and I did not let go, and I did not say a single word, because there was nothing in the English language adequate to the moment, and I was not going to insult it by trying. Then I heard it. A small sound behind Juniper's shoulder, a shuffle of feet on thin carpet. I lifted my head. A boy stood against the far wall, pressed into the corner with his arms wrapped around a small knitted sweater he was holding to his chest, pale blue, the size of a child's, clearly handmade. He was 5 years old maybe, with dark tangled hair and wide eyes that were the exact shade of green as Juniper's. He was looking at me with the careful, measuring look of a child who has learned early that the world requires assessment before trust. Ren. Juniper's voice muffled against my shoulder steadied just enough. Baby, come here, it's okay. The boy did not move immediately. He looked at me for a long moment, then down at the sweater in his arms, then back at my face. He reached into the front pocket of his jeans and pulled out a photograph, small, creased at the corners, the edges soft from handling. He held it up beside my face and looked back and forth between the image and the real thing with the absolute scientific seriousness that only a 5-year-old can bring to an act of verification. The photograph was of me. My garden on East Jones Street, autumn of 2019. Bennett had taken it without telling me. I remembered the afternoon, the smell of the last roses, the way the light was going gold. Are you, the boy said carefully, Grandma Addie? My knees gave out from under me. I went down to the floor without deciding to, and Imogen's hand was there on my elbow, but I barely felt it because the boy took one step forward and then another, and then he was close enough that I could reach out, and I did one hand open, letting him choose, and he leaned in and pressed his cheek against my shoulder, and stood there with his sweater and his photograph and the smell of his hair, which was the smell of a child, warm and particular and impossibly alive, a smell I had not been close enough to know for 10 years. Yes, I said. My voice was wrecked entirely. I am Grandma Addie. That evening across town at Memorial Health, a nurse named Delaney knocked on the door of room 14 and told Cordelia that there were reporters in the lobby and that nobody had to do anything they did not want to do. Cordelia asked her to bring the camera crew up. She asked for 3 minutes to brush her hair. When the camera came on, my stepdaughter was standing. She had one hand on the bed rail and her legs were trembling visibly, and she did not care. She looked directly into the lens, and her voice, rough and slow and recovered from 5 years of near silence, did not waver once. My name is Cordelia Whitfield. I am not paralyzed. I have never been paralyzed. They gave me drugs to keep me still and keep me quiet, and I let them at first, and that is something I will carry for the rest of my life. The people responsible are Vivian Ashby, Tobias Renfield, and Dr. Ezra Boone. She paused. She took one breath. And I want every person who has been taking care of someone they love, who has been told they are confused or wrong or too tired to understand. I want you to know that you are not confused. You are not wrong. You are just not being told the truth. She reached out and clicked the camera off herself. By nightfall, the safe behind the fireplace at the old house on Bull Street had been opened by the FBI with the 7-digit combination Bennett had written on a strip of paper and tucked into a maple wood box in the spring of 2015. Inside 43 physical documents, 6 rolls of undeveloped film that a forensic photographer spent 2 hours printing, and a handwritten index in Bennett's cramped leftward script, organized by year, going back to 1987. The investigation that followed would take 18 months and reach 3 counties and 1 federal district. But that was later. That was other people's work. That night, I drove back to East Jones Street alone. I put my key in the lock. I pushed open the door of my own house for the first time in 9 days. The foyer smelled of dust and the ghost of the magnolia that bloomed in March. The recliner was still in the corner of Bennett's study, angled toward the hospital bed that the officers had moved against the far wall when they cleared the room. The hospital bed was empty. The yellow blanket was folded at the foot of it, washed so many times it had gone the color of weak tea. And the room was quiet. Not the silence of a room where something is wrong, just quiet. the particular quiet of a house that has been holding its breath for 5 years and has only now on a cold November night been given permission to exhale. The grandfather clock on the mantel ticked. Once, twice. A slow, even unhurried count. I stood in the doorway of my husband's old study, and I thought about the promise I had made at his graveside in October of 2019. And I thought, Bennett, I kept it. I kept all of it, even the parts I did not know I was keeping. And then quietly, with no one there to hear it, I asked myself the question I had been too busy surviving to ask for 5 years. What do I want now? 3 weeks later, December in Savannah, and somehow against all meteorological reason, against every expectation this coastal city had ever set for itself, it was snowing. Not much. A thin, tentative dusting that settled on the porch railing and the bare branches of the dogwood and the roof of Bertie Calloway's house across the street, and melted at the edges, even as it fell, as if it wasn't entirely sure it belonged here. But it was snow. Real snow in Savannah in December. Juniper had pressed her face to the kitchen window when she woke up and made a sound I had not heard from her in 4 years, a short, startled laugh. The laugh of someone who had not expected to be surprised by anything so simple and was delighted to be wrong. I stood at the window beside her and watched it fall and thought even the weather is doing things it has never done before. Some mornings that is enough. On the 9th of December, Judge Constance Merriweather looked down from the bench of Chatham County Superior Court at Vivian Ashby and Tobias Renfield, and the expression on her face was the expression of a woman who had sat in this exact seat 12 years ago and watched a different family do a very similar thing to a very similar person and had never stopped being angry about it. She had accepted both guilty pleas. She had rejected both requests for reduced sentences without apparent deliberation. Tobias Renfield received 25 years. Federal charges on the money laundering and kidnapping counts were still pending in a separate court. The prosecutor had described them in a press statement as substantial. Vivian Ashby received 22 years. Judge Merriweather said before she closed the file, "The court takes no satisfaction in this outcome. The court does, however, take note of it." Dr. Ezra Boone received 14 years and a permanent revocation of his medical license issued 2 days prior by the Georgia Composite Medical Board. I heard he wept during sentencing. I was not there to see it. I had nothing left to spend on him. Sloan received 6 years reduced to 4 under the cooperation agreement she had signed in November. I had not attended her hearing either. I had written a letter to the prosecutor's office, brief, factual, neither forgiving nor condemning, and left it at that. There would be time later for whatever came next between us. I was not ready for it. I did not pretend to be. The rehabilitation center on Waters Avenue smelled of antiseptic and fresh-cut pine from the wreath someone had hung in the lobby. I was there on a Tuesday in the second week of December when Dr. Marin Tate, the woman who had looked at Cordelia's reflexes at 3 a.m. and said the 3 words that broke the world open, walked me down the hall to the exercise room and pointed through the observation window without saying anything at all. Cordelia was standing at the parallel bars, both hands white-knuckled on the rails. Her legs shook with the effort of holding her own weight, trembling the way a candle flame trembles in a draft, present alive and absolutely refusing to go out. Her physical therapist stood 1 step behind hands, raised and hovering, not touching. The clock on the wall above the mirror said she had been standing for 8 minutes. At minute 10, Cordelia looked up and found me through the glass. She smiled. Crooked, exhausted, and entirely real, the smile of a woman who had been told for 5 years that her body was broken and had just proven minute by minute that it was not. I pressed my hand flat against the window and felt the cold of it against my palm and did not care at all. When I went in, she reached for my hand and gripped it the way a person grips something they have been reaching for a long time. Her knuckles pressed hard into mine. I pressed back. "Mom," she said. She paused. She tried it again, quieter, like she was testing whether it was allowed. "Real mom." I held on tighter. Neither of us said anything else. Neither of us needed to. Juniper and Wren had moved into the spare room on the last day of November. Wren had reorganized the windowsill on the first morning, 3 stones of blue jay feather, and the photograph of me from 2019, which he treated as an object of permanent importance, regardless of where he was sleeping. On the 15th of December, he brought me a drawing held out in both hands, the way children offer things they have made with the total, uncalculating generosity of someone who has not yet learned that gifts can be refused. 3 crayon figures of unequal height beneath a lopsided green triangle studded with yellow dots. At the bottom, in large, uneven capitals, home. I taped it to the refrigerator. I stood in front of it for longer than I will admit. On Christmas Eve, my kitchen held 7 people besides Juniper Wren and me. Pastor Silas Hollander arrived first with his soup because he always arrived first, and he always brought soup. Theodore Marlowe brought bourbon, and the news that the Bennett House nonprofit paperwork was nearly complete. Mason Crowley brought a Cherokee rose, cutting in a clay pot. He had repotted himself, the wild one, the one that grew where it pleased. Bertie Calloway brought pecan pie and cried a little at the door and did not apologize for it. Hattie Voss arrived wearing the small silver crucifix and a smile I had not seen on her before, the smile of a woman whose report had finally years too late been believed. Otis Brennan came last snow on his boots and gripped my hand at the door the same way he had in his back office in November, warm, heavy, the grip of a man who understood some debts cannot be repaid but can be honored. Juniper sat at the table with Wren in her lap, watching all of it with the careful, luminous attention of someone who had spent 4 years in a room with one window and was now relearning what a full room felt like. She did not say much. She did not need to. She was here. That was the whole sentence. The Bennett House nonprofit would open in the spring on the ground floor of the old Bull Street property. Theodore had suggested a more formal name. I told him Bennett House was formal enough. They thought I was a useless stepmother. They spent 5 years calculating what I could be made to sign and how long before I outlived my usefulness. They built an entire architecture of deceit on the assumption that a 68-year-old woman in a recliner feeding someone with a spoon each morning was too tired and too simple to be a threat. They were half right. I was a stepmother. They were wrong about the rest. If you have stayed with me this long, then you have walked every one of those 5 years alongside me, the mornings with the oatmeal going cold, the nights in the recliner, the long silence of a house that was keeping secrets I was too trusting to hear. I am not a wise woman. I am not a brave one. I am simply a woman who made a promise and kept it, and somewhere in the keeping of it, God put the right people in my path at the right time. Mason at the gate, Hattie in the break room, Silas on the porch with a box he had been carrying for 10 years. None of what I found alone. These are the kinds of family stories revenge cannot fully explain, because what drove me was never vengeance. It was the refusal to let the truth stay buried. My advice to you, if you will take it from someone who learned it the hard way, do not wait until the wolves are already inside the house. Ask the questions that make people uncomfortable. Read the documents you are handed before you sign them. And if the people who claim to love you are working very hard to convince you that you are confused, trust yourself first. In the end, the most dangerous thing about revenge family stories is not the cruelty in them. It is how ordinary the cruelty looks from the outside. These are not monsters in disguise. They are people at kitchen tables passing papers across the woods smiling. The world is full of family stories. Revenge cannot undo, but truth can. Truth and the stubborn, inconvenient grace of someone who refuses to look away. If this story moves something in, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a thought in the comments. I read everyone. And if you believe these kinds of revenge family stories deserve to be told, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Thank you for staying until the very last word. It means more than you know. And a gentle note before we go, the stories ahead contain fictional elements crafted with care and with the sole intention of offering something meaningful. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for today, there is no judgment in stepping away. Find what nourishes you and go toward it.